So there's a church in Damascus that was bombed yesterday as people were in mass, okay? They were attending service and the church was blown up, and you have about 20 to 30 people that were killed, and it's really one of the worst massacres that Christians in Syria have seen. And you know, I can show you some of the photographs. This is what the church looked like. I was talking earlier actually to Kevork about this church. You can see here the icon of St. John is just splattered with blood. You know, and this goes without saying for those of you, for everyone, but for those of you who don't know, I mean, Syria is considered the birthplace of Christianity, just like Palestine, because it was exported, or rather, you know, spread from Damascus to Europe from Syria, right? So both areas played a considerable role. And before this war in 2011, you had 10% of the population that were Christian. Iraq, I don't know the percentage, but I know that how much it shrunk by. It shrunk by about 90%, and the same thing in Syria, right? So that's thanks to the United States, that's thanks to Israel, that's thanks to the United Kingdom, to the European Union. And, you know, it's not just the war itself that has driven people away, but then the normalization of the new regime, which has a history of murdering Christians. I mean, this guy who remember, there were no elections, right? Funnily enough. So Bashar al-Assad was a dictator because the elections were supposedly fake, although no one provides real tangible evidence of that. They just assume it's fake because they don't like Syria. And then this guy who declares himself the president, you know, a former commander in ISIS, a former commander in Al-Qaeda. So, you know, he in both organizations. He declares himself the president, and no one has a problem with that. He gets sanctions relief. He gets, you know, meetings with European diplomats and foreign ministers, and he kidnapped. Just so you know, just so you understand why this attack on the church is not some kind of accident, and that, especially with the timing, because they were going after Alawites. They were murdering Alawites, which are, you know, Syria is like a mosaic of ethnic groups and religious groups. So it's majority Sunni. You have a few Shia, you have a few Christians, etc., right? Armenians, Palestinians, Bedouins, Kurds, you name it. So what they did, I'm talking from after December when he came to power, Jolani, when they ousted Assad, they started assassinating, murdering, hunting down, slaughtering Alawites that live predominantly on the coastal area of Syria. So, you know, Tartus, Ladiye, you know, this basically, it's not Damascus in the capital, it's further away up the coast, right? It's a few hours drive. And I and others were warning that, you know, this is, of course, by itself, madness, you know, it's ethnic cleansing, basically. That's what it is. It's like a genocide. You're trying to finish them off, these people off, and claiming, you know, like some 20-year-old boy or you know, a teenager who's like 19 or 20 years old is a regime remnant. The guy was a child. He's probably born when the war, you know, there are people just like you babies that were killed. They're literally nothing to do with this logic, right? It's ethnic cleansing is what it was. And I and others like Kevork were warning that this is going to spiral out of control because they won't put a leash on these people. And as a matter of fact, it's not that they won't put a leash, it's that they sanctioned this. They know who these people are, meaning the West knows exactly who this guy is. They brought Al-Qaeda to power because Al-Qaeda doesn't oppose Zionism. I mean, when's the last time you ever heard of Al-Qaeda or ISIS attacking Israel? Never. They won't do a fucking thing. So, you know, they do what they're best at. They go and kill other Muslims. They go and kill other Arabs. That's what Al-Qaeda and ISIS are for. They're Western tools. So they started killing Alawites, then they went after Druze as well, and then Israel was pretending to come to their aid and saying they're going to invade Jeramana, which is like the wackiest shit I've ever heard. And then, of course, you know, now they're going for the Christians because they saw it. Like no one is stopping them. Why should they stop if no one is going to put their foot down, right? Like they're an irrational, violent actor. And no one is getting in their way. On the contrary, they're getting all these accolades and perks and sanctions relief and, you know, rehabilitation, normalization, resumption of ties, détente. I mean, why would you stop, right? Like especially if you've you've had a bounty of $10 million lifted. I mean, you must feel pretty invincible right now. And obviously that doesn't justify any of this. On the contrary, I'm trying to explain the rationale or the lack thereof behind these killers. And Jolani specifically, just so you understand that this is not some kind of like hypothesizing or, you know, like, oh, it's guilty by association. No. This guy personally supervised, okay, Jolani, the new Syrian president, yeah, or self-proclaimed president. He attacked Ma'lula, which is a Christian town outside of Damascus. It's about an hour's drive. And it's one of the only places on earth where people still speak Aramaic, which is what Jesus spoke, yeah? And Aramaic is like a cousin of Arabic, yeah? So, but people still speak it in various parts of Syria and like very, very small places. Ma'lula is one of the most prominent ones. And I think one of the first monasteries in the world is there as well. So he kidnapped, this is Jolani, right? He and his thugs went and kidnapped the nuns of Saint Tekla of the covenant there, and then I think it was Qatar. I don't remember who brokered some kind of deal. There was a deal afterwards, I think a year later, where the nuns were exchanged, and of course, because of extraneous circumstances, I need to watch my mouth. But someone liberated the town. You can go look up who it was. Okay, I don't know if I'm allowed to state facts, but because apparently I get in trouble for that. But my point is just that this guy has a history of attacking Christians, kidnapping Christians, desecrating Christian sites, and so does his cabinet. And so it makes perfect sense that he gets to power, and then you have a church being blown up all of a sudden. And keep in mind, Christians were also persecuted, as I was just saying in my last sentence, during the war. But these kinds of bombings, you know, like in Damascus, I mean, you would. I don't remember many of them. You know, it does stand out. It's I mean, it's shocking either way. And another thing that stands out, which I'm glad Syrian girl pointed out, is another bombing, but not in a church, but rather in a mosque. Okay, so she said the bombing of the church in Damascus reminds me of the bombing of the mosque that killed the mosque in which Sheikh Bouti was killed. Yeah. So the terrorist Wahhabis behind the so-called revolution attacked Christians and normal Muslims, but never Israel. Right, I made that point. So Sheikh Bouti was, if I remember correctly, he was a Sunni cleric, and you know, the complete opposite of these Wahhabi, takfiri jihadists like Jolani. So instead of saying, oh yeah, we need to go after, and you know, they don't, sometimes they don't say it like that. They'll say like purify, which basically means murder. Sheikh Bouti wouldn't do that. On the contrary, he was preaching unity and these kinds of things. So they literally murdered him. They assassinated him because he this is the kind of thinking that is promoted by Wahhabism, and even actually in earlier, you know, when we talk about the Muslim Brotherhood, and I'm talking specifically about Zawahiri, for example, right? Because you have different branches within that, and Muslim Brotherhood is more of a political movement than a religious one, like Wahhabism. You know, people who are Wahhabis like Jolani do not believe in elections, yeah. Whereas Muslim Brotherhood, they want to have elections and participate in politics and so on, and have Islam instituted through those democratic mechanisms. But people like Zawahiri, his version of that was that you can kill other Muslims if you know, it's perfectly fine to go and murder another Muslim if you know they're not up to your standards, which is like a blank check to just go crazy. You know, it's like it's the kind of logic that a psychopath uses, right? And that's exactly what he did, and he almost killed me actually when you know, the Egyptian embassy was blown up right opposite, or not opposite, but adjacent to my school in Islamabad. So you know, that just to give you an idea, this is despite being, and then of course, what did he do? He went and mentored bin Laden. This is in the early 90s, right? So he had his own group in Egypt, Egyptian Islamic Jihad, and then he went kind of and just, you know, switched to Al Qaeda full time, basically. So he went and became a full Wahhabist, yeah, which kind of proves my point. But anyway. Just to underscore the kind of mentality that we're dealing with here, it's like they will murder everyone. There is no one who is off limits. So I know I'm going through the list of, you know, Alawites, Druze, Christians, because these are minorities. But these people will kill and have killed, and they've done this not just in Syria but in Lebanon and also in Iraq, other Sunni Muslims. They don't. There's nothing that will stop them. They just want to murder, and that's what they're good at, and that's why they work for the West and they provide these services for the West, right? Again, just ask yourself, when's the last time that they not even attacked, but like, let's say resisted? You know, the person who set this off had the choice of going after Israeli troops which are illegally occupying Syria, or NATO troops, Turkey, US, and they said, no, let me go and blow up a bunch of civilians at mass. Like, who would do that? That kind of behavior reminds me of when the Israelis, the Mossad, were throwing grenades in the synagogues in Iraq to get Jews to move to Israel so they could increase the population, which is what they did. And they, it's got an Israeli tinge to it, right? These are some of the victims that were killed during the explosion, right? I'm not going to show you. I can't show you, unfortunately, like, the direct aftermath. But yeah, it's really awful. It's really awful. And what's shocking, what's really so obscene, is that if you go like right out, I know where this church is. Actually, I didn't recognize the name at first, but I was talking. Maybe some of you watched that stream earlier when I was live with Kevork, and I was talking to someone, and I remembered actually where this is. It's like, I mean, for anyone who knows Damascus, if you're going from basically downtown Damascus to Jaramana, which used to be kind of outside Damascus, but then it grew so big it's part of it. You pass this church on your right. There's like a cemetery. It's that church. It's that exact place, which is wild because I didn't connect the two. And then it's like a working class neighborhood, and yeah, this is inside. You can see this was just a few hours before the attack. Again, like I said, it's the birthplace of Christianity, okay? And what's shocking, just to resume my previous or my former sentence, is that if you go through the Suq al-Hamadiyya right now in Syria, which is like the main market, it's like Syria's Oxford Street, if you will, whatever. It's a bazaar. It's a grand market, and you can walk through there and you'll see now for sale ISIS patches and ISIS flags, and it's just like so normalized. And as a matter of fact, the security services, or so-called security services, basically Jolani's henchmen, which are Al-Qaeda troops, and half of them aren't even Syrian and can't even speak Arabic. Yeah, I said that. It's true. Half of them are not even Syrians. They're basically like Israelis, but they think, okay, well, this is my land because I'm a Muslim and I'm going to go. And they're fundamentalists. They're brainwashed, and they fall prey to these recruiters for Al Qaeda who say, well, yeah, come and fight and everything, and they make them feel like they're doing something holy or something good or productive. And actually, what they're just doing is America and Israel's dirty work. So a lot of them come from. You've got like thousands of Uyghur troops from China. You've got people from Pakistan, people from Tunisia, whatever, if all over the place. I mean, Jolani himself is I think his parents are Syrian. He's born in Saudi Arabia, and they had to get. They had to put him in charge and rehabilitate him and so on. But like I said, a lot of the people that now have key positions in Syria's cabinet or in the military are not Syrians. And I just want you to think about what a crazy security threat that is. Can you imagine, for example, in the United States, that you give you let someone who's from, I don't know, Mozambique or from the United Kingdom or from Guatemala become a general in the U.S. Army, and he doesn't even have citizenship, and what kind of security issues that poses? I mean, how do you know this person isn't a spy, and how can they even get that job if they're not a citizen? This is not one person or one case I'm talking about. There are Egyptians, there are Turks, there are people from China that have been given these massive responsibilities that should be going to Syrians first and foremost, and they don't even have citizenship. They don't even, some of them don't even speak Arabic. What kind of madness is this? It's not even a real country. It's a mockery. So do you see how? And this is important to understand, because that shows you that this revolution, or as they call it, this so-called revolution, wasn't a grassroots thing, because you wouldn't have to go to that extent to pool people, from all over the world. I mean, I'm sorry, Syria is a very capable country, and I don't know now the figures because they're a few years old, but I mean, it's got a very young population. That's a fact, right? They're not under 18 anymore now, but basically early 20s or mid 20s, so it's still a young population. Tons of university graduates. You can't tell me that you couldn't find a Syrian to fill these job positions. That's a bunch of bollocks. Okay, that's just a lie. This is you know, I can guarantee you, I bet you anything you like that those people are not only making a mockery of the country, but they're feeding intelligence back to their home countries as well, in Egypt, Turkey, Israel, you know. So what was his response to this church bombing, Jolani? He said that it was a criminal explosion. He didn't call it a terrorist bombing, a criminal explosion. Now you look at that and you tell me if that's a criminal explosion or a terrorist bombing. I mean, honestly, really, come on. What is a criminal explosion? Is that like someone who leaves, you know, they left a gas canister open and then, you know, someone lit a match? I mean, you know, like criminal neglect or something. What is a criminal explosion? Come on. The language, it's so unusual and bizarre, especially after something like this where it's very clearly an act of terrorism. You know, it just goes to further confirm that this government or regime that he heads is normalizing this stuff. And, you know, you can't call anyone. You got to call the police, or you got to call the security services. And instead of getting someone who's concerned for you, you get someone who shows up with an ISIS patch. Basically, you know, maybe that's the person who blew up the church in the first place. Maybe that's someone who's beheading other Syrians just last week. How could you know? And, you know, it's really shocking how it's been normalized like that. And this is extraordinary how Jolani was more upset over a US base in Qatar being bombed, right? I'm just reading his tweet here, but it's correct, than the church bombing in the heart of Damascus. Yeah, that's correct. And, you know, this video, I came across this video. I can't tell if it's the same person, okay? So you'll have to help me with that. They do bear a striking resemblance, but this guy who's smashing a statue of the Virgin Mary is apparently now Syria's defense minister, okay? Now, when I say apparently, because I can't really make out 100% if that's the same guy. I've seen this video before, actually, but it's so shocking. But, you know, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, right? So it doesn't really change anything I just said, because this is the same behavior that Jolani encouraged among his troops, among his men, whether he was in ISIS or whether he was in Al-Qaeda. So, I mean, whether this guy's the defense minister or not, you can be sure 100% that all of the people with cabinet positions in Syria now have the same beliefs as this. And it's such a, you know, it's how the mighty have fallen, basically. That's really the only thing that you can say.
سبحانه وتعالى لن يعبد في أرض الشام سوى الله ولن يقم إلا حكم الله ولن يعبد الجبت والطاغوت في أرض الشام بعد هذه الأيام بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى. لا نرضى بغير الله ودين الله وسنة نبي محمد بن عبد الله.
So you tell me if that's the same person in the photograph, but I just want to be very clear about something. You know, I think most people, whether they're in Syria or outside Syria, would be pretty disgusted by that, honestly. What's really ironic is that if you read the Quran, actually, Mary is mentioned in there more times than I can even remember, and is you know, held in very, very, very high regard in Islam. So actually what he's doing, he's quoting scripture and pretending to, you know, that like he's smashing an idol or something. That's really not what's going on. It's extraordinarily hypocritical and offensive, and I don't want you to get a misconception or get the wrong idea that this guy represents or that Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Jolani and these people represent how, you know, most Sunni Muslims feel in Syria. I don't think that's the case. Half the people that you see online in independent media that are talking about Syria are Sunni themselves, and they know what's going on. They know Israel is behind all of this, and they speak the truth. You know, so as a matter of fact, someone from Syria came up to me a few months ago, and, you know, they watched my show. They recognized me, and I didn't ask, of course, and it's kind of ironic because it's so meta, but this was just after, I think, just after December, so when Jolani came to power, and he was just agreeing with me, basically, that it used to be rude in Syria, or considered rude to even ask someone what they are. And of course, I didn't ask, right? But he said himself that he's Sunni. So, you know, we have the same politics, or same beliefs, or same viewpoints and memories, and saw and lived the same things in Syria. So, you know, that goes to show you that it's not about, you know, empires need to use divide and conquer and sectarianism to achieve their goals. That's why they employ people like this, like the guy I just showed you in the video smashing, the Virgin Mary, because they need that sectarian strife to cause internal division, and then it's much easier for them to take over a country that's fighting between itself, or fighting, people fighting amongst each other, than if everyone is united as one front against you, right? That's the whole mentality behind Western imperialism, and not just only Western imperialism. It's, many empires have used this in the past. But we are in a period of history right now where, yes, it's predominantly the West that's doing it, and has been doing it for the last hundreds of years. So Sykes-Picot, Balfour Declaration, and beyond. And not even just in the Middle East, but across Africa as well, and so on, and Asia. So, this is something that needs to be noted. But you should also remember that it's not just the West supporting this, it's the Israelis. I mean, like Syrian girls pointing out here, I mean, the amount of support that Israel has given these people, from medical assistance to logistics to supplies to intelligence to weapons to who knows what else, right? It's staggering. It's staggering. And it speaks volumes that Israel... you can see the former head of the Mossad, the Israeli Foreign Intelligence Service, speaking on Al Jazeera, and he says that he would ally himself any day. I mean, I'm paraphrasing right now, yeah, but his sentiment is basically that he would ally himself or give medical assistance any day to an Al-Qaeda fighter over a Palestinian fighter, right? Which speaks volumes. And I'll show you this video of the US or former US ambassador to Syria, Robert Ford, and what he had to say about Jolani. This is a recent video, actually. I think it's from last month. And, I think it's a fair assessment to say that he has blood on his hands.
Starting in 2023, a British non-government organization which specializes in conflict resolution invited me to help them bring this guy out of the terrorist world and into regular politics. And at first, I have to tell you, I was very leery of going. I sort of had images of me in an orange jumpsuit with a knife to my throat. But after talking to several people who had gone in, and one of whom had met him, I decided to take the chance. And so the first time I met him, this guy's name is nom de guerre was Abdulkader Jolani, but his actual name is Ahmed Shara, which he only revealed to the world after he captured Damascus in the Blitzkrieg of December 2024, about 5 months ago. First time I met him, I sat down next to him, and I'm literally as close as I am.
I love how he speaks about this guy like he's meeting kind of like an asylum patient or something. Like, it's so normal. It's just another day at the office. Like, fuck.
To Roy, and I said, this is all in Arabic, I said, never in a million years could I imagine that I would be sitting next to you. Long beard,
really,
and fatigues, and
I can bloody well imagine it, mate, and I think we suspected this all along.
He looked at me, he speaks very softly, and he said, Wallah ana, me neither. And we went on and actually had a pretty...
No, Wallah ana, not Wallah ana. That's completely different, but yeah, whatever. I'm giving him shit for his Arabic. It's really not my main concern.
Civil conversation. I share this because he said something which really piqued my interest. He never apologized for the terrorist attacks in Iraq or in Syria, although there were many fewer in Syria. Never apologized. But he also said, now I am governing an opposition-held area of northwest Syria, and I am learning that the tactics and the principles that I was following in Iraq do not apply when you actually have to govern 4 million people. And they had 2 million residents of that area of Syria, and then another 2 million refugees who had come there from other parts of Syria. So they had a population of 4 million. He said, I am learning that to govern, you have to make compromises. I was very struck by that. So that was in March 2023, just over.
Jesus, I mean, this is like, he's talking about someone who decapitates people and kidnaps nuns and murders Syrians, Iraqis, Lebanese. what is like what his voice is so soft. Yeah, okay, I don't care about his voice or his, you know, anatomy and physical features. I think that's bloody irrelevant. And then he talks about the fact he doesn't apologize for the terrorist attacks like it's a good thing. Oh, how honorable. He's so good. You know, he believes in what he did. I feel like I'm losing my mind when I watch this, you know. And remember, this is Robert Ford, so he used to be the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Syria, okay? In other words, what do embassies do? You all know the answer. I wouldn't be surprised if he's CIA. I mean, does it matter if he's even CIA? Does it really matter? I think that speech by itself, I couldn't care less which department of the government he works for. It's just the speech is problematic. You know, there's so much wrong with it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken as well, he was walking with people in the streets, which is something that U.S. ambassadors fucking love to do, which is really faux pas. Yeah? Il faut pas. So he was going out on the street and protesting with people against the government that gave him his diplomatic accreditation and is hosting him and giving him security. What? And then you'll see the U.S. ambassador in Lebanon do the same thing. Or, you know, the U.S. ambassador in Russia to Moscow will do the same thing. And I think he posted directions for like a protest or something. Mad people, really mad people. You're not supposed to go against the government that it gives you accreditation and hosts you. Okay. Anyway, so you know, this did happen, this terrorist attack, and the same people that have been behaving like this are now running Syria. It doesn't look or bode well for Christians. It doesn't bode well for anyone, frankly. It doesn't.